death in Minnesota of George Floyd. I have asked for this investigation to be expedited and greatly appreciate all of the work done by law enforcement. My heart goes out to George's family and friends. Justice will be served. I can tell you that as I'm briefing you at this moment, the President is receiving a briefing from the Attorney General, Bill Barr, on this, and the Deputy Director of the FBI. So that is ongoing as I begin this briefing. Secondly, I want to transition into some news from SBA and Treasury that was announced that today the U.S. Small Business Administration, in consultation with the U.S. Treasury Department, announced that it is setting aside $10 billion of round 2 funding for the Paycheck Protection Program to be lent exclusively to CDFIs. Those are community development financial institutions. CDFIs work to expand economic opportunity in low-income communities by providing access to financial products and services for local residents and businesses. So we're encouraged to see that. And then finally, before taking your questions, I wanted to address what has been going on Twitter and with social media. I believe it is time to, quote, get the facts about Twitter and other social media platforms targeting their bias against President Trump and conservatives online. If we were to judge the bias of Twitter and its top employees by their own words, the case would be an easy one to make. Twitter's head of site integrity has tweeted that there are, quote, actual Nazis in the White House, and no fact-check label was ever applied to this absolutely outrageous, offensive, and false claim made against the White House and its employees. But let's judge Twitter based on their actions, not based on the words of its top employees, and its actions are no better. President Trump recently received a so-called fact-check label for a tweet. It was a false fact-check and an accurate fact-check, but nevertheless, Twitter moved forward with it. Dan Scavino, the deputy chief of staff here, was the first user in the history of Twitter to receive a so-called, quote, manipulated media label for posting a video that played a verbatim clip. It is no coincidence that these two unbelievable interventions by Twitter were targeted against the President of the United States and one of the President's top advisors. This is bias in action. And while big tech is quick to censor the President, quick to censor some of his top employees, they are very reluctant, it seems, to label some of the actions by Chinese officials, some of the misinformation that has been spread by China. For example, to move off of Twitter and move to Google, they created a search engine for the Chinese Communist Party, which blacklisted searches for human rights and allowed for easy surveillance. Facebook and Twitter have both taken paid advertising that spread disinformation about China's mass imprisonment of religious minorities, and Twitter has allowed Chinese officials to use its platforms to spread misinformation about the coronavirus, undermine the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, and more. And then back in March, a Chinese official began spreading a conspiracy theory on Twitter, an egregious one, that our U.S. military was responsible
that was
for
OAN
the
that started
spread
that.
of the coronavirus. And
OANN,
that
lady that stands in the back of the room without a face mask, that she's not supposed to be there.
Concerns about it to get a fact check. So they appear to be very hastily eager to censor.
That's an American
President
conspiracy
Trump
theory
and
that
some
it
of
started
his
in a lab in
employees,
North
but a little
Carolina,
reluctant when it comes
and
to
OAN
China.
broadcast
it's a
it.
bit befuddling. But no one believes in the First Amendment more than the President. The President will take action to ensure that big tech does not stifle free speech and that the rights of all Americans to speak, tweet,
and the First Amendment protects
protected. And finally, I just want to note one other action of Twitter that I learned just before walking out here, that on the Mueller report, their anti-Trump headlines were anti-Trump by a ratio of 76-1. That's extraordinary, and it's not just bias aimed at President Trump and his employees. It's also aimed at everyday Americans. It's aimed at the movie Unplanned, as Twitter suspended their account and then came up with an excuse in the aftermath. And then just another example, that liberals are allowed to incite violence against Covington kids who were in the end proven right, and their video was taken out of context, and yet these individuals were allowed by Twitter.
I was thinking about Covington kid this morning.
It's very disturbing to see. So
all he had to do was step out of the way.
Concerns, and with that, I will take questions. Jim, that's a very nice tie, Jim. By the way.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yesterday, the U.S. hit 100,000 deaths from the coronavirus. That happened at around 6 o'clock yesterday evening. It took until about 9 in the morning.
She's got something written down to answer this.
Recognize that on Twitter. What took him so long?
Look, the president recognized that landmark before we even hit it. The president, that was, after all, it was the impetus behind him lowering the flag to half-staff. He did that for several days, and that was an acknowledgement of that number approaching, and he acknowledged it in a tweet this morning.
But we hit 100,000 yesterday evening, and it took 13 hours, some odd hours, for him to recognize that and tweet about it.
And far in advance of that benchmark, as I noted, he lowered the flag to half-staff. The president has said, you mentioned 100,000, but the president has said one death is too many. He takes this very seriously. He said before, this is the hardest part of his presidency. It's something that no one wanted to see happen.
And on Twitter, shouldn't the president be fact-checked? Especially this president who has made so many false and misleading statements that has put, fact checkers to work across the world. I mean, he's uttered some 18,000 false and misleading statements, according to the Washington Post. If there's any president out there who should be fact-checked, any political leader out there should be fact-checked, isn't it President Trump? And aren't you trying to silence fact-checking by going after Twitter like this?
Look, well, first I would say I disagree with all, if not almost all, of those assertions that you're making there, because look, if you're going to get into the fact-checking business, there's no one that should be fact-checked more than the mainstream media that has been continually wrong about a number of things. To give you a list of some of the most egregious ones.
Here's the list. Russia, Russia, Russia.
ABC News in December of 2017 falsely reported that Flynn would testify that the president directed him during the campaign to make contact with the Russians. That was false. In 2017, your network CNN botched their WikiLeaks email exclusive and were forced to make on-air corrections. CNN's Jim Sciutto, another CNN one, dropped a fictional bombshell in 2018, July, claiming that Michael Cohen would tell federal investigators that the president knew of the Trump Tower meeting. And there are many more, not to just put the onus on CNN there. So if anyone needs to be
That's incorrect.
I
He
think
said
it should be the media.
he knew about Trump Tower Moscow and signed a letter of
Mistakes
intent.
from time to time. We own up to those mistakes. We correct those
Not
mistakes.
always.
Yeah.
I have many you guys haven't owned up to. I could get to.
We do
Okay,
on
give us a list.
regular basis. The president never owns up to any of his false or misleading statements or outright lies. You have pledged in this briefing room to never lie to the American people. Are you saying that the president of the United States has never lied to the public before?
I'm around the president. His intent is always to give truthful information to the American people, and you mentioned that the media apologizes
She
for
just
their
lied to the
mistruths.
American people
I'm
this morning.
Sitting here looking at other headlines in the New York Times saying there aren't enough ventilators to cope with the coronavirus. In fact, we had an excess of ventilators we've shipped around the world.
Oh, he
Washington
said that
Post,
we
US
were
health
out.
system is showing why it's not ready
The cupboards
for
were
coronavirus
bare.
pandemic. We were ready. There's many more I could get to. I could, on the coronavirus specifically, I could spend the time going through these, but I don't think that's what the American people want to hear. Yes.
On the Minnesota case, does the president agree with the firings of the 4 police officers, and does he believe that they should be prosecuted?
I haven't talked to him about that specifically, but let me tell you this, that he was very upset when he saw that video. I was on Air Force One. I don't know if it was the first time he saw it, but he certainly saw it again on Air Force One. He was very upset by it. It was egregious, appalling, tragic, and it prompted him to pick up the phone, or the chief of staff to pick up the phone and say, we need to expedite what was already an FBI investigation. He wants justice to be served. Yes, Jack right there.
Thanks, Kayla. Can you give us an update on when the president plans to sign the EO on Twitter and social media? And can you also give us an update on his plans for China and Hong Kong? Is there an order coming on that as well?
So thank you for the question. First, I would note with regard to the timing of the EO, that should be later this afternoon is what we're hoping for, hopefully before 5 p.m. But again, it could change. It's still in the works, but we are getting closer. With regard to Hong Kong, I would just say, reiterate what I said 2 days ago, but I would also say that China's decision to impose a new national security law in Hong Kong lies in direct conflict with its international obligations under the principles of the legally binding UN-registered Sino-British Joint Declaration, and that Secretary Pompeo determined that Hong Kong does not warrant different treatment under U.S. laws because Hong Kong no longer remains sufficiently autonomous from the PRC. And then anything further, I'd refer you to the State Department for now. Paula.
Just one more somewhat related. The House recently passed a bill about a minority group in China, the Uyghurs, if I said that correctly. Does the president plan to sign that? And is the White House going to treat bills, or does the White House see any concerns about bills that have been passed by proxy as not being constitutional.
So we would, first, let me say, we would encourage Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and others to come back to the Hill. It's more productive to have those members here. The Senate has convened, the House can do the same, and they can do it in person. But with regard to the
They're
Uyghurs,
do-nothings,
that's a
but
very
it's more
important
productive
question.
to have them
We
here.
haven't received the bill yet, so the president hasn't been able to look through it, and I won't get ahead of him on announcing one way or the other on that. But I would note that the Trump administration continues to take actions to hold the CCP accountable for its
And I
highly
have a
repressive
list.
campaign against the Uyghurs and other religious and ethnic minorities. Paula.
Hey, Kaylee, thank you. On
Paula.
vaccines, in order to achieve herd immunity, you need about 80% of people to get this vaccine. Currently, only about 50% of Americans say they'll receive it. So, will the administration make the vaccine mandatory?
So the vaccine, let me just note that we're working aggressively to get one, and we would like to get one by the end of the year.
Will it be mandatory?
Everything does not depend on a vaccine. Vaccine's an important component of this, but there are also therapeutics.
There are no
we're seeing
therapeutics.
There's not necessarily a tie to reopening and an increase in cases, so that's encouraging. And I would refer you further to Alex Azar, who's made extensive comments on a vaccine and the
It's
necessity.
clear if you guys will make it mandatory, if you'll use your federal powers, how you'll use them potentially to encourage people to get this vaccine. Because if you don't have herd immunity, elderly people, immunocompromised folks, they may not be able to go about their business again.
Yeah, I would have to talk to the
That's right,
president.
Chris.
I haven't talked to him about his
Bleach
views
your
on
Lysol.
making it mandatory or not, so I'd have to talk to him and get back to you on that. Yes.
Thank
Oh, good,
you,
she's gonna
Kaylee.
get back to
I wanted
us.
to ask you a question, first of all, about the comments in your statement that you made. At the conclusion of your comments, in regards to George Floyd, you said that justice will be served. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that those officers who've been fired should be arrested? Do you mean by that those officers who've been fired should be prosecuted? Do you mean that those officers who've been fired should be convicted? What do you mean by justice should be served?
Yeah.
Will be
I'll,
served.
I'll leave that to the justice system to work out, but the president,
What do you mean when you say
those were,
justice will be served?
that's in the president's statement, so I'd refer you back to his statement. But
You're the
he's being briefed
spokesperson,
on
but-
this right now, and we'll have more announcements as they come. Yes.
And another matter in regards to what you said in your statement, in regards to the executive order, I realize it hasn't come out yet, and I realize we haven't seen the language, but we have seen reports. I work for Fox, and we've seen reports that it relates to the Section 230, the Communications Decency Act. And
Also known
interestingly
as the
enough,
Dentist Act.
former Vice President Joe Biden has also called for the repeal of Section 230. He says that it should be revoked immediately. But as you know, an executive order does not trump the law. An executive order can't,
Good choice of
for
words.
instance, repeal the law. It can't in any way amend the law. So what would be the intent behind this executive order without getting
It's
ahead of
a
what the
show.
president intends to sign?
It's
Yeah, I don't
just
wanna
a
get ahead
show.
of that, but the one thing I will say more broadly, you referenced that section. I
She's
think that
not gonna
that
answer-
would
I'm not
be
gonna answer
included in
that,
what I'm about
but
to
I'll just
say.
reference more
There are
broadly.
various shields in place that essentially shield some of these social media companies and allow them to censor conservative users, and we're not able to see
And
what
me.
happens behind those shields. That section was one of those shields you mentioned, so we're looking at ways to remove those shields to shed some light on what is happening and some of the decision making behind the scenes.
Can't do that.
That's generally and broadly the idea, but I won't get ahead on any specific announcements that should come hopefully before 5
No, they didn't do
p.m.
the
John.
executive order yet.
Kelly, I want to follow up on Jim's question on fact-checking and Twitter, but first a clarification.
What are the odds she goes to
Has the
OAN and
president
then
spoken
reads
to
and
the
walks off?
family of George Floyd?
Drop
Not
the
to my
binder.
knowledge. If he did, without my knowledge, that could have happened, but not to my knowledge.
Do you know if he intends to, or will you get back to us on that?
I can ask him, and I can get back to you on that.
Okay. And
Will she, though?
regarding the fact checking, I mean, the president clearly said things in these tweets that are not true. Do you not acknowledge that?
No, I don't acknowledge that.
He said, for instance, that the governor of California is sending out ballots to millions of people, anyone living in the state, no matter who they are, how they got there. That is not true.
Not true at all.
California is sending out absentee ballots to registered voters, not to
Registered
anybody.
active voters.
That's just
Active
not true.
voters.
So let me address this in detail on the issue of ballots. And I'm going to lay out some of the president's concerns, and in that, I will get to the California example. First, I want to note that there is a Pew study done that shows there's plenty of reason to believe that mass in the mass mail-in system that there is fraud. They estimated that approximately 24 million, 1 out of every 8 voters registered in the U.S. are no longer valid or are significantly inaccurate. So these are people who
You know,
are
if they
on
die
voter registrations that have not been
or
maintained,
move.
that have not been kept
Yes.
up. More than 1.8 million have been deceased, they estimated.
Yeah.
And when you look and
People die.
drill down into some of the examples that we've seen in states, Nevada I read about this
Ivanka
last
and
week,
Jared
it just
are both
really
registered in
struck
2
me
states,
as
or
a
they were.
perfect example of what the president is concerned about with
I
mail-in
wonder if Trump
ballots and the
unregistered
fraud,
in New York
that
when
can
he
be inherent
moved to
in that.
Florida.
There were ballots, because Nevada mass mailed them out to voter rolls,
Uh-huh.
that were piling up in apartment complexes, outside of apartment complexes in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
sitting around in trash cans. This is how
Right.
we're
Did they-
protecting
were they
ballots.
used to vote?
It's
No.
extraordinary. Postal workers, one 36-year veteran carrier said she's never seen anything like these influx of absentee ballots. All of the people had moved or died when she set out to deliver on her first delivery route, and this happened just recently. You can go read the articles from last week. She found 65 ballots of people who had moved or died on her second carry, 100, and then as the
And
week
now they'll be
progressed,
inactive
thousands just
voters.
sitting in
It's her
crates. I
job
mean, this
to
is
send them
extraordinary.
back,
This is not how we should
and
be
then they go on the
protecting US
inactive
ballots.
voter
In South
rolls,
Carolina,
and they won't get ballots
Dems,
anymore.
The Democrats sued to force a rush transfer of mail-in voting, and this happened again recently. I think it was last week. And mail-in ballots for South Carolina turned up in Maryland. There's another
Yes.
example of 700
20 of them
suspicious
out of
mail-in
17
ballots
million.
in Dallas, and an individual charged with second-degree felony illegal voting. And he's accused of visiting a woman in April to collect her blank absentee ballot, filling it out, and forging her signature. I mean, this is extraordinary.
That's a good point,
and
David.
Then you go on.
They're all
there's a
run
New
by
Jersey
SOSs,
example of over
Secretaries of State, sorry.
3,000 ballots that were seemingly set aside. And
State
going
Secretaries
to
of
California,
State.
you mentioned California is one of those states that's notorious for ballot harvesting. And in 2018, the registrar in Orange County said that they reported that his office had people dropping off maybe 100 or 200 ballots at a time.
Okay.
And somehow in LA
Are
County,
they
112%
valid ballots?
of LA County is registered to vote. So the problem
Because
is
of
this: when you don't
inactive
clean,
voters.
your
They don't
register,
get
and you
ballots.
send out your entire register, auto send out these ballots.
I'm
They
about
end
to
up in
become,
trash
on
cans
Monday,
like
I will
Nevada.
be an inactive
They are
voter
subject
in
to
Los
fraud,
Angeles.
and that is extremely troubling.
So, but Kelly, I asked you a
I
very
might be
specific
back by
question.
the election.
The president said that California was
Thumbs
sending
crossed.
out ballots to everybody in the state. That is
Anybody
a
who
false
could
statement.
walk.
It is not correct. Will the president correct that, acknowledge that what he said is simply not true?
There is an executive order that was put into place recently by Gavin Newsom
Oh,
that would
Chris,
auto-send
ouch.
to voter rolls, and that would lead to what the president was suggesting.
No, it won't.
Yes.
Excuse me, Kelly.
No.
To registered voters, it's not to everybody. It's to registered voters.
Yeah, to
Registered
everyone,
active
including dead
voters.
people on the voter rolls, including to the
No,
mysterious
active.
112% in LA County. That's not just
Come on.
everyone. That's everyone.
Come
plus
on,
an extra
somebody.
12%. And if you're not concerned about that, I'm sorry. I mean, the media is very concerned about the security of our elections, but when it comes to mail-in ballots, all of a sudden, the concern for election security just melts away.
But Kelly, you yourself
Yes.
have voted by mail.
Thank you very much.
Brian.
Kelly's voted by mail like 11,
Research
10,
has
11
shown
times.
that, one, it doesn't benefit either party. It increases voter participation. Secretaries of State of both parties are still pursuing it.
Yep.
And fraud is not widespread. And so
Good.
why is the president continuing to tweet about this and to give the impression that there's widespread fraud in the use of mail-in ballots when he himself used a mail-in ballot?
That's right, Robin.
The big question is, some are concerned that the president may be laying the groundwork to cast doubt on the election. Is that what he's doing by bringing this up?
Well,
It's
I
just
appreciate you
distracting.
bringing up this question,
100,000
specifically
people
the
dead, and we're
component
talking about
the
this.
president using mail-in ballots. There's an important distinction, and I think it's lost upon a lot of people, but it's important to make, is that the president is okay with mail-in voting so long as you have a reason. He's not okay with mass mail-in voting where you auto-send, as I said,
You know, like the
all of
military.
these voter rolls with people who are dead that are subject to fraud. That is the case.
Sometimes people
listed off
die.
For you, I think
There's
going to
be like 100,000 extra ballots,
were from
as
just
Chris
this
pointed
week
out.
And last week, so this does happen. And
Research has shown, Stanford University did a research study that showed that there wasn't widespread fraud in these vote by mail, and that it didn't benefit either party and increase voter participation. So why would the president be against that?
Yeah, it is subject to both parties. This can hurt both parties. I would note that a bipartisan
It
commission
doesn't
led in
benefit
part
either,
by
is what the
President
study
Jimmy
said.
Carter, a Democrat, concluded that mail-in ballots, quote,
In
remain
2005,
the largest source of potential voter fraud. So moving
and since
the
that, he
entire
has changed
country
his
to that
mind
system
because states
doesn't make sense,
have
and
changed
doing
their
so in a hurried
processes.
fashion ahead of November. Just go look at the Democrat Iowa
Jimmy Carter's
caucus
just
and
fine
how
with
it
it.
worked out when they tried to move to a new system.
That was an
And
Iowa
then
caucus, and it
finally-
wasn't mail-in.
Results of the election.
Finally,
That was an app issue.
No, he's certainly not doing that. And I would finally note there's an additional concern that was very well laid out by the Wall Street Journal editorial board that in 2016, minorities and first-time voters were more likely to have mail-in ballots thrown out. So that is another troubling concern. In fact, 319,000 of those total votes were rejected. Yes.
Thank you. Back in November, President Trump went up to Walter Reed, said it was for phase 1 of his physical.
Oh, good.
When does he plan to complete phase 2 and release the results to the public?
Well, he's busy
Yeah, I
golfing.
don't have an update on the physical, but because you asked that, I'll specifically inquire about that today and try to get
Plan
back
to
to
do
you.
it?
I've
What?
been asking.
Plan to do
Yes.
it?
Why
he
doesn't she
does.
read my tweets?
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. I wanted to ask you about, President has completed his 2 weeks of hydroxychloroquine. Have you spoken to him, what he's feeling about? Is he feeling better? What's his feedback about that?
I did,
wasn't sick.
and thank you. I know that you emailed me a question to that effect, and I didn't have time to follow up with you via email. But because I saw that, I went into him just before coming out here, and I asked him that. And he said, quote, he's feeling perfect. Quote, he's feeling absolutely great after taking
As
this
perfect
regimen,
as
and, quote,
Ukrainian
he would take
phone
it
call.
again, if he thought that he was exposed. So he is feeling very good. And I also would point folks, there's a very, very well done piece. It's very thorough with a lot of medical experts laying out about prophylaxis use of hydroxychloroquine by Tina Hessman-Say at sciencenews.org. It's very well done. She talks about the nearly 200 clinical trials around the world, including 28 involving healthcare workers. In fact,
Including
at
the one in
Henry Ford
France where they
Hospital in
just
Michigan,
banned
3,000 healthcare
hydroxychloroquine.
workers are taking it as part of a trial, and there's some really excellent information there about the use of prophylaxis for this.
Number of Indian Americans doctors have been writing. I have seen some of those letters. They are supporting President taking hydroxychloroquine. Some of them have themselves taking it. Have you seen those too?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot. It's not specific to the president, these doctors, but they just talk in general about what they've seen. For instance, Sarah Lofgren, an infectious disease doctor at the University of Minnesota Medical School in Minneapolis, they're testing hydroxychloroquine there to prevent COVID-19. And she said when used alone, we're not seeing major issues out of the thousands of patients. We're not seeing things that some people are concerned about. And I would just note that it's important, of course, always, if taking hydroxychloroquine, get a prescription from your doctor. Doctors are the ones that need to be prescribing this. But that being said,
it's prescription
I think that
medication.
some of the hyperbole around this drug that has been on the market for 65 years, been approved for use in 3 other maladies, and has been approved for off-label use. When there's a lot of hyperbole about this being unsafe, some of the things I've seen reported out there are consequences deterring people from being recruited into actual clinical trials. I have some quotes from a New York epidemiologist and others conducting trials saying they're having trouble recruiting people because some of the myths that are out there. So it's important to note that this drug has been safely used by millions of people for a long time.
One more on China.
Yes.
President yesterday tweeted about
He gets
wants to
unlimited
mediate
questions.
between India and China on the border dispute. China has been behaving very weirdly, very aggressively with its neighbors in the last few weeks, in particular in South China, so you must have seen on the Indian border side. What's the message President has to these countries?
Yeah, I'd refer you back to the president's tweet on that one. Yep. Yes, Christian.
Thanks, Kaylee. We saw reports that
Why does he have a
before swearing in
spokesperson?
John Ratcliffe as DNI, Rick Grinnell declassified a trove of documents related to the Russian investigation.
Tranche.
President hinted that those could be made public sometime soon. Does the director plan on doing that anytime in the near future?
Yeah, so those, I believe, are under a process of review by the DOJ, so I'll refer to them on that. Yes. Tom, do you
I
have a
want a
question?
tranche.
I thought I saw you had your hand raised. No?
Kaylee.
Are they out of questions?
Yeah, back there.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I want to ask you about Russia's recent actions in
It's not a way in, they have a
Libya.
mask
The
on.
U.S.
Yeah.
AFRICOM has been issuing statements recently about U.S. actions there, and in their statements, they're saying that Russia is clearly trying to tip the scales in its favor in Libya, just like it did in Syria, by deploying military aircraft likely to provide close air support and offensive fires for the Wagner Group that is supporting Libya's LNA fight against the internationally recognized government. What's the White House position on this? Do you agree with the U.S. AFRICOM assessment that their actions, the Russian actions in Libya, are destabilizing the region?
Yeah, we encourage de-escalation in Libya, and for more, I'd refer you to the DoD. Janelle?
Thank you, Kaylee. If Joe Scarborough were innocent, couldn't he sue the president for defamation? And then, in turn, couldn't President Trump's attorneys immediately depose Joe Scarborough and allow him to go on under oath and explain how
that's
the
OAN.
20-year-old woman
Here we go.
was found
Here we
dead
go.
by
This
his
is Joe
desk with
Scarborough, the
multiple
murderer.
skull fractures. Would the president welcome a defamation suit from Joe Scarborough?
So on that, I would just refer you back to some of my previous comments that the audio on the Don Imus show was very disturbing, where there was a lot of laughing and joking about this matter that certainly is
On a
not
morning
laughing
radio show.
and joking matter.
Do you
Laughing
think that
on a morning
Scarborough
radio
has
show.
grounds to do so?
So I have no further comments other than to just point back to the Don Imus audio. Who hasn't? Yes. Do you have a question? Yeah.
When were the states first notified that they would have to take the lead in COVID-19 testing? I know the CDC was working on it early on, January, February, there was a problem with the test.
Just
When were
wanna
the
fix
states
his
told,
mask.
hey, you have to prepare and take the lead here in testing your population?
So I don't have a precise date for you, but I know the way the process went, where the states came up with the plans that they
You did,
thought
Stephanie.
they would need to have adequate testing in order to reopen. Those plans were given to us, and Admiral Joie meticulously went
Neil.
through all of those plans, ensured that we had enough supply to shore up those plans
We
that
did
states
not.
had, and to make sure that the states had enough to safely reopen. So that was how the process went, and the president has done really extraordinary work with testing. 300 to 400,000 tests per day is
Not enough.
pretty good number, a very good number, I would say. More than 15 million done, beating the world in testing numbers, and
Not China.
under 10% positivity.
Beating the
is
world.
at
Like,
least
what
the
does that matter? We're also
barometer
beating the
given by
world in deaths
WHO
by
as what's
a
necessary.
long
And
shot.
nationally, we're at under 10% positivity. In fact, we're at 7.5% positivity rate. So we are doing quite well on testing. Is there anyone who hasn't gotten a question?
No, there's a
Last
lot of people that
right
still
there.
can't get tested.
Has the president heard from his counterparts regarding the G7 summit? Is it actually going to take place in June at the White House?
We do aim for it to take place then. It's gotten
That
positive
guy is
reception.
clearly a
I
secret
inquired about
agent.
this 2 days ago and was told it's getting very positive reception from world leaders. So we do intend for that to take place here.
You have
I
a
have
date
a call
in
on
mind?
you. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. You yourself have been able to vote by mail several times. Do you think anyone with health concerns, who has health concerns about going to the polls, should have that same convenience?
Yes,
that right?
Stephanie, you
So
know
what
that
I would
personally.
note again is the distinction between absentee voting and having a reason, and mass mail-out voting where ballots are sent in a widespread fashion to people who are dead but on voting rolls, and those ballots end up in trash cans. That's a
Okay,
state-by-state
but
consideration.
they don't
I'll leave it to
vote.
states to determine what is a valid reason. But there
dead
are,
people
if you're an elderly
hardly
person,
ever
you
do
know,
These are
anything.
health considerations for a lot of their residents. And if they want to pursue that track, is there anything wrong with that?
Again, I mean, you're asking, I assume you're asking with relation to the pandemic that's going on. None of us know where we're going to be in November. I'd first note that. We don't have a crystal ball. But what I would say is that there are real concerns when you don't do in-person voting. And South Carolina is a great example where Democrats literally sued to force rush mail-in voting. And what happened? You had ballots from South Carolina ending up in Baltimore. That is not a tenable system. And as states start
That's
to reopen,
20
and we
ballots,
see people out at
none of which
beaches
were
in
used for
Florida,
voting,
and we're not seeing
because
these mass
they weren't supposed to be
spikes. We
there.
see people safely
That was a
going to
printing
restaurants
error.
and social distancing and washing their hands and doing all of the wonderful mitigation techniques put forward by our experts. They're reopening society, and they're doing so safely.
Oh, so
And I
we're
think
fine
there's a
because we're
way to
washing our
continue
hands.
Our great civic duty of showing up and voting in a way that is safe. And the same way it's safe to eat at a restaurant, it's safe to go to a beach. We can vote in a safe fashion, and I think that's something that is good and to be celebrated as we head to November.
Oh, well,
all right, I think I
I'm
took
going to a
everyone's
World Series
question.
game.
Thank you so
We
much,
fixed it,
guys.
everybody. We washed our hands. That's that. All right, so I'm busy moving right now, but I've managed to set this up, and I think
Watch
that it worked.
C-SPAN's daily,
And we're going to shut
unfiltered
down
coverage
C-SPAN.
of
Give me
the
a second
government's
here.
response.
So yay, this worked for now. Sorry, there's a fan noise in the background here. That's just to keep this laptop cool. This is an old laptop. Let's pause C-SPAN here. Okay. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to keep an eye on things, and if I get a chance, if I'm not out at the storage room or something in the meantime, I'll keep watching for President Trump signing the executive order, and we'll bring that to you. I don't think he's going to take questions on it, because there's going to be questions about 100,000 Americans dying, and I don't think he wants to face that right now. So he'll give it a couple of days. He'll distract. He might talk about Joe Scarborough from 19 or 25 years ago or whatever it was. Thank you, JC. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Guitar. I appreciate that. I've been doing a lot of research on mail-in ballots. I mean, I lived in Washington. I lived in California. I voted mail-in ballots forever and ever. Lower voter fraud. This whole thing. So Kaylee was on TV today talking about 112% of voters in LA. 112%.
Kaylee.
I said Kaylee?
Yeah.
What? It was, yeah. Kaylee Macaroni.
Oh,
No.
I thought it was Kellyanne
No.
Conway.
Do you want to do this?
The blonde lady who was talking, it's Kellyanne Conway.
They're all this. No, Kellyanne Conway and Kaylee Macaroni are two different people.
Then I was mixed up.
Yes, you were. Do you want to do this?
No, but...
Because you can take over.
I really want you to try this. It's so good. It's life-changing.
This is Red Bull Summer Edition.
Watermelon.
Brought to you by Red Bull. I'm not going to drink a lot of it because I drank Red Bull and had a heart attack. So don't drink this stuff before you go and play hockey. JC says, hi, Kevinly daughter.
Isn't that so good? Isn't it so good? Stop.
I didn't actually drink any. I blocked it with my tongue.
That's disgusting. Keep this, asshole.
No, it's for you. I'm not going to drink it.
What? You just poured it all over yourself.
No, I poured it down my cheek.
Dad, that's so bad. Why would you do that? Buy me a
because I'm a terrible father.
Isn't it good, though?
It is good. So, Red Bull watermelon actually tastes all right.
It's delicious.
It's delicious. So, Red Bull, if you're watching, I won't mention the part about the heart attack. We'll just have Kevinly daughter give an endorsement. Let's say $20. Go Habs, Paul. I'm going to block you. There might actually be hockey. That's big news. So, Paul, thank you for pointing that out. Joanna G, thank you for joining us. God, it's sweaty in here. Oh, yeah, we're moving, and the AC broke. And they inspected it yesterday, and it can't be replaced. So they brought a little, like a portable unit that I now have to set up, and it's going to cool like a room. So, better than nothing. But we're moving without AC, and it's going to be 90 today. So this was actually a welcome break for me. I'm trying to get Red Bull to be a sponsor. Red Bull, if you're interested, reach out to me. Other than that, hey, if you guys are interested, most everybody in here is already a patron that's chatting. I know there's a lot of people who watch that don't participate in the chat, which is totally cool as well. If you'd like to help out, go to kevinlyfather.com. And you can become a patron there. Or if you'd like to PayPal me directly, you can do that. PayPal.me/KevinlyDad. PayPal.me/KevinlyDad, and that'll bring you right to my PayPal page, and you can donate there. I am on a remote laptop right now, so I don't have the credits. I could, type them out or something, I suppose. So thank you to everybody, especially our generous 38 cents per annum sponsor, Chris Wilson. We always appreciate everything he does. And to our producer, Joanna G. JC is a resistor or a protester. Stephanie was our very first patron, so that's all I got for credits today. I'm going to try and download it from my main machine, which is up in Seattle right now, but who knows what's going to work. God, look at this. Wow. My hair now goes beyond the camera's ability to capture it. We're not talking about politics anymore. I could just sit here all day just talking to you guys. I miss you so much. Okay. Your shout. I want to give a shout out to all my supporters out there. There you go. Okay, that's the end of the stream. We might see you later on today if the president goes live with the executive order. If something else happens, I don't know, shoot me a DM on Twitter or something. Let me know, and I'll see what I can do about it. I'm just going to be moving and sweating. Be